Welcome to 1000 PS TV. I took the Moto Morini Calibro for a spin. Stay tuned. There are still 30 employees here, and that's where the design is done. You can see that we were allowed to take a look at the halls here in the background today. We were in the design studio with VR glasses. The work there is modern, and it's also very important to people here that these are still Italian bikes, but we also saw that they are actually produced with the finished plans in China. Then the bikes are shipped here, and a brief final inspection takes place here, but then they go directly to the dealer. There is no other way to get into this class, and this brings me to the Calibro in this 650 class. If you look at other European manufacturers, it is also the case that the middle class is manufactured in Asia. There are big names there. That's no longer a disgrace, so to speak. The cost pressure is simply there, and that's when they ventured onto the European market for the first time in 2021 with the Moto Morini Escape, for which we already have a video online, with this 650cc licensed engine, which practically grew up in the Kawasaki Z650. Here we have a revised engine. It's the 650cc built up in the classic 693cc way, which gives it a power of just under 70 horsepower and 68 Newton meters of torque. That really benefits the vehicle. This one is currently still Euro 5 homologated, but they are working on Euro 5 plus homologation. And also the Naked and Touring Enduro models, or the Scrambler, I could imagine, they just didn't really want me 100% today, but I could imagine that they will soon come onto the market with the slightly updated engine. Yes, then I'll just get on this Calibro so you can see what a 1.87 tall European looks like on an Italian-Chinese bike. And many bikes in this class suffer from the problem that they are somewhat petite. If you think of a Rebel 500 from Honda, for example, that's not the case here. I have enough space and the knee angle is relaxed. I have the footrest position nice and far forward. The handlebars are a comfortable width. I get one knee under the 15-liter steel tank, which is shaped like this, but it all works out wonderfully. And there's also plenty of room in the saddle for people who are standing upright, quite comfortable. We have not yet been able to try out how it looks with a pillion, but it is theoretically possible. The payload is 185 kilos apropos weight. We're talking about 214 kilos ready to ride with a full tank of 15 liters. So I think it's actually a relatively nimble bike, and you can already see that the seat height is extremely low. Moto Morini specifies 725 millimeters. That's easily enough for my legs to get down, but it's also enough for much shorter riders. And what is also interesting is that we have a second footrest position. You could set the footrest more than 10 centimeters backwards, which would probably make the knee angle very tight for me, but I think that's a real argument for smaller riders. Apart from that, as I've already mentioned, you get on and somehow feel at home. This is also due to the fact that the look of the instruments, especially the switch units, is familiar from a relatively large American manufacturer. They have also adopted this blinker logic. Right-hand flash is right, left-hand flash is left. Unfortunately, this doesn't reset automatically, which is a bit out of date for me and should no longer be the case. But well, be that as it may. Apart from that, I'm going to put down a hole now. You have to say everything here has a high quality feel to it. For example, we have an aluminum mirror, left and right, rear view mirrors. All the units are of a very high quality. The only drawback, especially if you are thinking of smaller pilots, is that there are no adjustable levers, so you have to use what you have. It's not a problem with my huge hands, but one or two smaller pilots or petite ladies might struggle with it. Yes, the wheel dimensions of the Calibro. We have a 130 18-inch tire at the front, a 180 16-inch with a 65 cross-section at the rear, which is relatively unusual. But I would say that the standard tire is perfectly adequate for this vehicle. This is a Dim Sum, a Chinese tire. I've had less experience now, but on the test lap today it was quite hot and the grip level was relatively okay. That's why I don't dare say too much now. But, and this is what I was getting at, a second dimension has also been homologated. That means we also have the 180, 70, 16 rear dimension, where there is a bit more choice on the market. We have 320 millimeter front brakes with a 2-piston brake system, which is nothing spectacular. At the rear, there are two 55mm discs with a single piston brake caliper. And the brakes are fine. We have Bosch ABS on it, as has of course been a legal requirement for some length of time now. The braking force and pressure point are fine, but you can't expect a racing brake. Incidentally, the same applies to the suspension. We offer a conventional 41mm front telescopic fork with 120 millimeter suspension travel. At the rear, we have these classic dual shocks with 100 millimeter suspension travel. They are adjustable in preload. The front fork is not adjustable. Everything is now at a very solid level. We've also had higher speeds with slightly longer corners. It remains stable, just as you would expect from the class, or what you would expect from the class. But these dual shocks at the rear, that's also sometimes the case with more expensive vehicles. You get the one or other bump that the Lombardy roads have in store for us today, relatively abruptly into the spinal cord. Even though the seat is quite well padded, this is unavoidable. Apart from that, I can't tell you too much about the riding because our test lap today was relatively short at 35 kilometers. We don't have any riding modes. We don't have ride-by-wire. We have virtually nothing on it apart from ABS from the electronics. I think the display, maybe a word about that, is very well done. We have an analog rev counter and an easy to read LC display that tells you the speed. And then there's a fuel gauge and gear indicator. That's all included. But beyond that, there's no connectivity or anything like you know from other Moto Morini models. The basic requirement for this at Moto Morini is that they want to keep it as simple as possible. And I think it also suits the vehicle well. All the lighting units are LED. We have this characteristic Moto Morini ring at the front with which all vehicles from the company are equipped. The front and rear indicators are also LED, as is the rear light, so there's nothing to complain about, just as little as the steel tank at the top of the tank cap, which can be locked with a key. The Moto Morini lettering and logo are really nice, so you can see that attention has been paid to detail here and there, which is perhaps not usually the case with so-called Chinese bikes, so you can see that a little more work has gone into it here. And otherwise, yes, the engine has benefited from this measure, that it has been given a little more displacement, a little more torque and power. It's still not my kind of engine. So for me, quite honestly, a vehicle like this would either need a 2-cylinder with a crankpin offset or even a V2, if possible. And I still have the feeling that the vibrations in the engine become very noticeable from 5,000 RPM. It revs up forever, which is a bit like the issue with the Vulcan S from Kawasaki. That's not surprising because the base is very similar. It's just something that I don't think is justified in a cruiser. What they have achieved, however, is something to be commended. You can ride it really relaxed up to 5,000 RPM. The belt drive installed here not only saves you having to lubricate the chain, but also ensures that the throttle response is relatively smooth. And I can really shoot through the first few gears with the 6-speed transmission, which also shifts well. And it's not built for spirited riding anyway. So I have to say, if you want to get down there and cruise, I think that's what this vehicle is for. I can actually give it a positive testimonial here. Apart from that, the suspension charged brakes are all designed for this leisurely country pace. Certainly nothing for racing. Yes, and that brings me to a not insignificant point, the prices. The fact is that the Moto Morini will be launched on the market in Switzerland for around 77.90 francs, including all costs. This will be the case in August. There's also a second version of the Moto Morini. It has a batwing fairing at the front and side pockets at the rear, each with a storage capacity of 19 liters. So cases, suitcases actually. That's quite remarkable. It will be a few €100 more expensive. It is not yet clear what that will be. There is also a cover for the pillion so that it becomes a one-seater, so to speak. And the line of the rear mudguard continues nicely. And there is also a bit of hope from Moto Morini that the customizing scene will take on this vehicle. And I'd say the basis for this is not bad. Now I owe you the prices for Germany and Austria, but to be on the safe side, I'll link them below because they're not quite fixed yet. Austria, please don't hold me to that, 88.90 euros I think. And in Germany we're significantly cheaper at around 80-100 euros, which I would also say puts Moto Morini in a good position in the segment. So Kawasaki Vulcan S, because I mentioned it before, that also costs around 9,000 euros. The Honda Rebel is a bit cheaper, but also has the smaller engine. So what else is there to think about? The Benelli 502C is significantly cheaper, but the workmanship is not where the Morini is, and not in terms of performance either. It only has 48 horsepower. A hot competitor and a comparison that would actually interest me personally is to pit it against the Royal Enfield Super Meteor 650. It also only has 48 horsepower, but due to the 650cc twin cylinder, I think it's relatively similar in terms of torque, and I think that could be an exciting story. And now it's your turn. Please tell me, how do you like the Moto Morini Calibro? Do you think it's the right move for Moto Morini to try it out again in this way? You have to tell me if you like the video itself, and if you're good enough to leave me a comment below and a thumbs up, I won't be mad at you either. Otherwise, It's nice that there is diversity. It's great that things are happening again in Italy, also in the affordable segment, not just at high RPMs. In this respect, I'm saying goodbye to Bella Italia and saying ciao.